Hello, I'm Carol Warren, and I'm going to share a lesson with you today that's titled Reading the Coyote School News. It is a lesson for grade 4, and it lasts from 2 to 3 class periods. Overview of this lesson is that we have a lot of our customs in our ranching industries that were practiced by early Mexican American ranching families. Today, many of those customs are part of our life. We also have other cultural contributions made by the Mexican Americans, and we'll be looking at those in this lesson today. So what we'll have our students doing is they'll explore the legacy of Mexican culture to our American life while they practice some mapping skills. Our materials include the book, Coyote School News by Joan Sandin, a map that's titled the Gadsden Purchase Map. We'll have one for each student. And we also have a couple of worksheets that the students will be using. We want our students to be able to locate the Gadsden Purchase on a map, measure some distance, and also look at cultural items and customs from Mexico. For their writing, they'll be writing a newspaper article about their event at their school. In session 1, we'll basically set up the scene by asking the children to think of examples in life in America today that they think came from the Mexico or Mexican culture, and have them list that on a chart. We can be reading a story, and then they can add to that or see if there's any that they thought of themselves that are also in the book. So we're going to discuss how immigrants to America bring with them customs from their homeland, and many of them become part of our life in America for everyone. And so some of those that they've put on their chart are examples of just that. We're going to be looking at two handouts for this part of the lesson. First, the Gadsden Purchase Map, and then an Arizona and Mexico worksheet. I want to show you the worksheet because it is actually divided into 3 parts that they'll be using in 3 different parts of the lesson. In the first part, we want to have them understand how Arizona once belonged to Mexico and how it became part of the United States. And this first paragraph at the top is one they can read together to understand that. It became part of the Mexican Cession in 1848, and then the rest of it was purchased with the Gadsden Purchase. Now, the next step after reading about that is to look more closely at the Gadsden Purchase Map, which we will do. The Gadsden Purchase Map is a map of Arizona and New Mexico with the Gadsden Purchase area outlined at the bottom. Now, the students should understand that they'll be reading or hearing a story about the children that live in this part of Arizona. And it's 1 year in their school life at a small school in the town of Amado, which is right south of Tucson but north of Nogales. So they're going to be learning about that. But before they do that, they're going to be doing a little bit of map skills. So if we go back to our worksheet, you'll see that the second part of the worksheet is the directions for the map activities. So we're going to have them do some map scale and also locating the Gadsden Purchase. You'll be then giving them a worksheet that is actually a sheet on which they can take notes as you're reading. You're going to review that you're going to be reading about the Mexican-American ranch families in southern Arizona, and they're going to hear different parts of that tell about different customs that they used in Mexico that they brought with them and remained in Arizona. So their worksheet actually has 3 sections: the food, the holidays, and the activities. Now, if each student has a book, or if they have a book for a small group of students, they can go ahead and put the page number. If they're just listening to you read the story, then just ignore that column of the worksheet. Now, the story can be read together, the whole thing, or it can be read in 2 separate segments as your time allows. So after you've read the book, you're going to review with students the many jobs and activities that are on a ranch, and the roundup is a very important part. And so we have you reread those pages, and if we can look again at our worksheet, the bottom section of the worksheet is now used in order for the students to put the events of the roundup in the correct sequence. And so then this worksheet can be collected for assessment. I also wanted to show you the pages that show the roundup, since we really won't be reading too much of it, if any. But here's the pictures that we see when they talk about the roundup, some of the illustrations that are shown with it. So these are the 3 pages that you'll be looking over in order to have the students understand the sequence of events. You're going to end the session by reviewing their original list and then adding anything that they might have learned from reading the Coyote School News about cultural items that came from Mexico. Our second session will be doing our writing. So you want to review what they recall from reading the Coyote School News. And if I can show you again the book, one of the things that you want to be sure they remember is that the students in the little school had a newspaper that was called the Coyote News. And this was throughout every chapter of the book. And so using that as their model, have the students discuss some subjects that they might write about if they had their own class newspaper. Then you have them choose their subject and write an article for the class. It could be something they talked about together. They could use their own suggestions or ideas. But it does have to be written correctly according to the standard that we saw earlier. And you're going to publish this in a newspaper format. So to assess, again, you can be looking at the map for their geography and history. You can be looking at the graphic organizer and sequencing for reading. And of course, writing can be assessed. And we're going to look at mechanics using the 6-trait rubric. Some extensions, and these are wonderful sites. There's 2 sites to go to. One is called the Little Cowpuncher site on the University of Arizona's website. And it actually has information on the school, the teacher, and the newspapers that this story was modeled on. It was a teacher who did teach in southern Arizona and taught in many rural areas of Arizona, but she always had the little newspaper. So you can actually see some of the Little Cowpuncher newspapers, original. You can also see some of the photos from that. The other actual website that you can go to that talks a little bit about life on a ranch in Arizona is the Empire Ranch website, and they have some historic photos there. Now, the other thing that you can do is to share some other children's books about life on ranches. First of all, we have Chico, which was written by Sandra Day O'Connor, and it tells the story of a section of her childhood living on a ranch in southeastern Arizona. The other is titled The Year of the Ranch by Alice McLaren. Alice McLaren also wrote Roxaboxen, if you're familiar with that story. This is the story of a family who lived for a year outside of Yuma. And while Papa tried to make the desert bloom like a rose using irrigation systems. And so this is another way you can see what life was like on a ranch for children. Papa tried to make the desert bloom. He was not successful, so they only lasted a year. And it is an agricultural ranch, not a cattle ranch. And the last one that's listed is the Arizona Territorial Cookbook, which actually has a chapter on being young in the territory, and it has some photos, it has some information about how the children played, and it also has some of the recipes for some of the things that they like to eat. So those are all places you could go to extend information about ranching in Arizona. And our source, of course, the information on our book, Coyote School News. And again, this is kind of a fun way to learn about life in the ranching part of Arizona, as well as the many contributions we get from the Mexican culture. Thank you.